from an industry standpoint, people almost kind of devalue or minimize the value that an influencer really has as a business owner. I don't hear people talking about influencers as business owners as much as I'd like.
This is Beyond Influential with Brittany Crystal. Join Brittany as she chats with today's thought leaders about the power of influence, how it's developed, and how they get us to consume both on and offline. Here's your host, Brittany Crystal.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Beyond Influential. I wanted to include a little preface before my intro to this episode to just stress how important I think the topics covered in this episode are. I believe there's a lot of education lacking in the market when it comes to what creatives, entrepreneurs, and influencers need to know in order to protect themselves as a business and to actually build and scale themselves out into real businesses. This is something I've been very passionate about because I don't think most people are adequately equipped with this kind of knowledge. A lot of creatives and influencers I know get so excited to get the brand deal or the client who agrees to work with them that they don't think about the bigger picture, potential downsides, or read the fine print. So I'll be working on sharing what I learned so you don't have to find out the hard way. Today I'm talking with Nico Becerra. Nico is a lawyer and business consultant based in San Diego who works with creatives, influencers, and entrepreneurs to turn their ideas into healthy, well-built businesses. Prior to becoming a lawyer, he was an operations manager for a business where he helped take it from 25 employees and $3 million a year in revenue to 130 employees and $10 million in revenue. He is also a professional surfer. Welcome to the show, Nico.
How's it going?
Good. Just as the caveat for this interview is not meant as actual legal advice, correct?
Yeah. I should always start all of my conversations about the law with, this is not specifically legal advice for anybody. This is general information. However, if you need legal advice or if something I say interests you, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. But when it comes to the general conversations we're having, it's not legal advice. Please don't take it as such.
So I'm really glad you're joining me today because a lot of people are intimidated by the idea of talking about law, hiring a lawyer, even thinking about legal in any capacity. And I think lawyers are like doctors in that way. People don't want to go for preventative measures. They go after there's a problem.
I love that you brought that up. First, thank you for having me. And also as it relates to the whole doctor kind of metaphor or analogy, I always say that, don't look at the law as medicine, look at it as nutrition, right? Where you're not going to take a pill and solve the problem. That's the worst way to look at the law, and that's going to be the most expensive way to look at it. People don't like preventative law because of the intimidation factor of meeting a lawyer, the relationship requirements. I mean, you don't want to just go out and hire a lawyer and ask them to do something very significant. You'd want to build a relationship, make sure that they're learning your business, understand your brand, your product, your service, and really you, because law is very much customized to the client. And when it comes to the medicine versus nutrition, the more you're paying attention to it, where your lawyer is not your doctor giving you antibiotics, he or she are more like a personal trainer. They're holding you accountable to comply with what the recommendations are. They're making sure that you're not making mistakes or cheating on your diet. And they're really holding you accountable so that you're avoiding risk as opposed to saving you after you maybe went on a Twinkie binge and gained 30 pounds. That is going to be more expensive to fix and more work to fix. And it's going to make you feel miserable because now you've got to really fight to correct all these things, and it'll interfere with running your business, which is what a lawyer wants to stop from happening. And they want to help you only focus on running your business.
So can you talk a little bit about your background and how you got into this area of law?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I was I call it a wannabe pro surfer for a little while. And my family, my dad's a lawyer and he owns a big law firm here in San Diego. And I have always been interested in the law. I've always been interested in business. And so I went to business school, went to law school, helped run the family's business. As you mentioned, we basically grew it 3 or 4 times what it was when I started. I learned everything you need to know about running what I call, the legal definition for small business is 500 or less employees. So it was a big small business in my opinion. And I just have always been passionate about entrepreneurship and figured I'd rather go out and work with creatives and entrepreneurs as opposed to just big entities. His clients are Fortune 100 banks. Not that that's not an amazing opportunity. It just wasn't as fun as creatives and entrepreneurs can be. And then the influencer side of it and getting involved with influencers, my fiance, Jordan, actually works in the influencer space and has introduced me to a bunch of great influencers, and her brother and sister-in-law are actually influencers as well. So I got exposed to this industry specifically, learned a lot about it, saw there was a need for legal support, business support, and just kind of fell in love with the creatives in this space. There's just so much cool stuff happening. It's a newer industry, and the law is really important. And I love just approaching it in a way that it's like, all right, the law doesn't really have a hold on this space, but I want to try to help these creatives and these influencers realize how important the law can be.
So I definitely want to talk about entrepreneurs and influencers and working with brands. When do most people come to you for advice? Do most people come to you too late, or how do you actually start building that relationship?
So
people come to you too late?
Are word of mouth referrals. I started just with family. Like I said, Jordan helped introduce me to some of her clients, and then also her sister-in-law and her brother. And I just looked for opportunities to help. If there was something that I could do on her brother and offer insight, advice, I just paid attention and learned and built trust that way. It's not that often that I'll get a phone call like, hey, I'm looking to prevent problems. Unfortunately, a lot of the times it is, I'll get a phone call, whether it's from like an ad I have somewhere or some marketing thing that I did, or maybe Jordan posts an Instagram and says like, oh, my fiance is a lawyer, and I'll get a phone call. It's like, oh my God, like I heard about you, or I found you on Instagram, and I need help with my business. And that's kind of how I get introduced to these things, which is not my favorite because we start off on a bad foot. I get to help them, but I also don't like that it's not a positive encounter most of the time. But I basically try to sell myself as the preventative lawyer and hope that I can find influencers and small business owners that are like, oh, I need to get protected. But most of the time it's, hey, I need help.
So we were talking about it a little bit before we started recording. What's the ideal relationship that you'd like to have with an entrepreneur or influencer?
My ideal relationship is I want to be your go-to person for business and law. If you're building a business, whether you're an entrepreneur and you have an idea for a service or a product or an influencer, I actually think that from an industry standpoint, people almost kind of devalue or minimize the value that an influencer really has as a business owner. I don't hear people talking about influencers as business owners as much as I like. There are huge businesses being built by influencers. A lot of people look at them as just, Instagram models or bloggers or what have you. And I think that there's a misconception. I don't know people in any industry that work as hard as most of the influencers that I've worked with. And the businesses that they're building are substantial. And so I want to be the person that, whether you're brand new or extremely established, that can come in, look at your business, look at what you're doing. Maybe you don't have somebody on your team that has the business experience or the business acumen or the legal acumen. And I just want to make sure that you're not creating risk, that you're not, losing money, or that you're taking advantage of what could help you build even a stronger and bigger brand.
I mean, it's so true. Influencers that I've spoken to, the successful ones, they are the hardest workers. You have to be to make the content, to put out the product. You always have to be on.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't envy them for the amount of work they have to do. It's awesome. I mean, I think it looks glamorous when you're following them and you're looking at it, but I mean, just to, like you said, to be on 24/7, that's a lot. It's a lot of work.
So what are the most common questions you get from entrepreneurs and from influencers?
I think the most common question I get is usually early out. They're confused about whether they need a corporation, an LLC, and contracts. Do I need to get an attorney to review my contracts? Do I need to form a company? Really, am I doing this right? That's kind of the question that I get a lot. There's companies out there like LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer that offer, prepackaged LLC formations or contract templates. I think the risk with that is they're selling you a product, not really selling you a service or a relationship. Cost-wise, it's a lot cheaper, but you get what you pay for. It's kind of like a doctor. You don't want to take all of your medical advice from, WebMD. We'll all be dying if that's the case, right? So I think that if you build a good relationship with an attorney, They'll be able to guide you, make it within your budget, meet your business needs. But the biggest question is always, am I doing this right? What are the risks? And can you look at this contract? I'm afraid to sign it because it's 20 pages and it's obviously important and I don't get it. And that's really where most of the questions come from.
Let's talk about the legal costs for a second. What do you tell people who think that law is just going to be expensive? Like, you're going to hire an attorney, you're going to talk to them for an hour, you're going to spend $1,000, and there's no way that that's worth it.
So I can't speak for my industry because unfortunately there's a lot of bad apples in the industry. But when it comes to me, I think that the smartest thing you can do is talk to a lawyer. Make sure that they're not going to charge you. If they're going to charge you just to talk to them, then you're talking to the wrong lawyer. I give away so much time to people who want to build a better business or protect their businesses because that's what I want to do. I want to be there for them to help them grow, help protect them. And if you look for them, just like anything that you do, whatever industry, whether it's a plumber, a mechanic, or anything that requires support or assistance, find somebody who is willing to go the extra mile for you. So when it comes to cost, I structure my costs in a way that benefits the customer, not me. It benefits us both, but at the same time, I'm not going to bill you for every minute we're on the phone if I'm forming a company for you. I'll sell my services at a flat fee, and the conversations are included in that. When it comes to as you're growing your business, I try to set up payment plan arrangements or anything that I don't want my legal support to hurt your business. I only want it to help. And I think a lot of lawyers, because they work at big firms, have to charge a lot of money to support the overhead. Whereas I'm a little bit more flexible. I have a smaller office. I'm a little bit more mobile. I can be more affordable, but still provide the same, if not more value.
For the podcast, just about how the lawyer-client relationship is a relationship. And just in general, any relationship that you'd have, like you're saying, with a doctor, a therapist, or anybody who you'd want to be with you long-term, it should be a long-term play. It shouldn't be about the short-term monetary value. So
exactly. Yeah.
So it's important for everybody to shop, especially in the influencer space. You want to find someone that you can actually trust, so that way they can help build the business along with you.
Absolutely. I think if you're an influencer and you think you need a lawyer, well, you probably do if you're doing anything that's a business, regardless of what industry you're in. But as an influencer especially, it's such a unique industry. There are very unique relationships within the industry. You want to meet a lawyer who understands your brand, your vision, your goals, because it's like I said, it's like nutrition. If you're trying to be a bodybuilder, what you eat is very important. If you're trying to just lose weight, what you don't eat is more important. And so I think it's find somebody who gets your brand, gets your vision, and then also somebody who gets the industry. Because if you go to your dad's lawyer or your mom's lawyer, they probably don't get influencers. They probably don't get the industry. A lot of the older attorneys, and I don't mean to disparage people by age, but people who aren't in with this industry don't even understand how influencers make money. They don't connect with that. And so if the person you're talking to doesn't even get what you do, that's kind of a red flag for don't go with that person.
So these might be two different answers, but what are the first legal steps you would suggest for someone who wants to start a business? Whether, I guess, on the entrepreneur side, just an actual physical business, and on the influencer side, they know that they want to build their personal brand and probably eventually build out product.
So we talked about this a little bit before. My fiance, Jordan, is in the process of starting a business that is going to be influencer consulting based. And she said to me, she's like, everybody I see online is like, be a hustler, go out, like kill it, do all these things. And then she talks to me and she's like, there's so much administrative stuff. There's so much of this behind the scenes stuff that is really difficult. And those behind the scenes issues, those little issues can turn into huge problems. So from a legal standpoint and from just a business standpoint, if you're starting a business as an entrepreneur, one, make sure that what you're doing is not illegal, right? So like if you're selling drugs, you shouldn't meet with a lawyer because they're just going to tell you not to do it. But if you're offering a service, make sure that it's not, find out who regulates this industry. Is there a law that I need to know about? Is there something that I'm doing that could potentially put me at risk? So just kind of assess what you're doing and make sure that you're not breaking a law in the way that you're doing it. The other side of it would be setting it up correctly. Whether you're going to be a sole proprietor, whether you're going to form an LLC or a corporation, do it right. A lot of the times people will come to my office and they're, 2 years into their business and they go, oh, we want to bring in a new partner. And I'm like, okay, let me see your formation documents. And they're like, oh, we did it on LegalZoom like 2 years ago. I'm like, okay, send me what you have. And all that they have, and I'm not going to go into the details because they're not really that important, is articles of incorporation, which is just a one-page document filed with the Secretary of State. There's no contracts. There's no, whether it be an operating agreement for an LLC or bylaws or anything. I don't have a clue who owns the shares. They've probably never even issued the shares. So to make a long story short, set it up correctly. That's really important because it's going to protect you from the liability that is why you formed the company, and also from just basically having a mess to deal with later that will cost you 20 times what it would if you did it right the first time.
So when do you generally need an LLC?
I would say, and again, not giving specific legal advice, not knowing the situation, if you're not making $800 a year, you have a business idea and you're not making at least $800 a year, which is what it costs in California, minimum franchise tax payment, then you're probably not ready to start a company. If you're making money, you have individual relationships with clients, or you have a product that has a risk or some kind of, exposure liability, create a company. If you're not making money, if you just have like a blog and you're not really getting into any contracts yet, you're not really doing anything, again, without knowing your specific situation, if you're not making money, you don't waste the money to form a company. Now, you won't get the same protection, but what's the risk? So really forming a company has to do with risk and also has to do with structure. If you have partners, you probably want to form a company because it just makes more sense to have a validly formed and something in writing, an agreement. But otherwise, I mean, it's such a person-to-person answer, but if you're not making money yet, you're probably not ready to form a company.
So you touched on partnerships. I've talked to a lot of people whose partnerships have gone sour and they've ended up having issues and kind of dissolving the partnership. Is there anything people can do in the upfront to protect themselves? I know it all seems wonderful at the beginning, just like prenups. That's why people get prenups, because you want to do it while things are good, so that way to prepare when things are bad.
So there's a funny saying that I've heard that says, if partners were a good idea, God would have had one. It's, I don't want to say that partners are a bad idea. There are very successful partnerships. There are very successful businesses that have multiple founders. The best way to prevent future issues with your current partnership is look at it as a business transaction. Don't look at it as a bunch of friends going in to start a company together. Money, liability, stress of a business will absolutely impact and change the way that partners communicate with each other and look at each other. So kind of like you said in a marriage, if you're looking at a marriage like a business transaction, you'll want to get a contract in place, which is what a prenup would be. So really the best way you can't prevent problems with your partners, but you want to be able to prepare for problems with your partners. And it's better to negotiate those issues when there aren't problems than it is when a problem arises and you're trying to negotiate a way to separate or deal with the issue. So I go through like a 20 question process with partners to see if they're ready to talk about the things that are really part of a partnership, right? So I ask questions that are like, if I were to offer you $100,000 today, would you walk away from this? One partner might say, no, I'm in this for the long haul. Another partner would be like, yeah, 100 grand, I'm out tomorrow. So you really want to ask difficult questions early so that you know how, just emotionally, there's a psychology to the law that is very important. Knowing who you're dealing with, knowing what you're dealing with. And if you can ask the right questions, you can get a lot of those answers up front and save yourself a lot of pain in the long run. So I would say invest in the tough stuff early. That's how you avoid those problems.
It's amazing how this stuff is exactly like personal relationships.
Absolutely.
It's exactly the type of thing you should be asking. You don't need to ask it on the first date, but when it comes to money, like you need to ask those questions really early to make sure you're on the same page before you invest a life and a future together.
Oh, 100%. I have clients that hire me as more of like a business coach or a business consultant. And I've often been told that I'm like a business therapist because I help people get through a lot of the stresses that come with running a business or having a partner. So I totally understand that idea.
So I know a lot of people who are more freelance creatives. Do you have any suggestions or tips for them in terms of payment terms or getting paid a portion upfront, or if those people even need to form a corporation?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I'm a freelancer and I am a kind of a single owner service provider as a lawyer. And I absolutely think that, depending on what you're doing, if there's liability, creating a company is important. If you have, if it's a service over time, get a contract, because it's hard to explain to somebody how much your services cost if you're not being upfront. And it's way easier. I talk to people about this all the time. They're like, oh, I told this guy I would paint his house for $1,000 and I painted the house and he won't pay me. Or we were painting the house and now, I had to buy more paint or something like that. And he won't pay me the extras.
I think I answered that question on the bar exam.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, if it's not in writing, good luck proving it, right? And so get it in writing. In terms of what you should do, collecting money up front, paying over time, payment plans, take it on a case by case. Money up front, look at your industry. If people in your industry are collecting up front and you're not, there's probably a reason that industry collects up front. And if they do, then you should too. If you want to be flexible, just be willing to deal with that flexibility later. So I think that look at your industry, number one, in terms of your payment terms. Definitely get a service agreement in place. Don't pretend that it's going to be easy to collect. I know that probably the biggest problem in every industry is collecting accounts receivables or past due. So if you can prevent it, a lot of lawyers collect fees up front as a deposit because they don't want to have to deal with not getting paid. And lo and behold, the industry is very known for clients that don't want to pay. It's kind of like, if I fix your problem, what's really your kind of what leverage do I have? I've already fixed the problem. So why are you going to pay me? You cannot pay me and then I got to sue you. I don't want to sue my clients. So if you can get your money up front, get it up front. If you can't, get a good contract.
What do you suggest if someone isn't paying? Do they come see you?
So I have an interesting thing, and you can see it on my website. It's basically like a prepaid legal service where I offer, it's kind of like a way for people to invest in legal support. And as an attorney, I hold your money in trust. So it's not my money, it's your money. But part of that is I offer discounted demand letters. If you have people who aren't paying, a lawyer's letter, if you really have the intent to sue, don't hire a lawyer if you're not really willing to sue. But usually a lawyer demand letter saying, hey, you owe, $1,000 to this person, you haven't paid them, usually is pretty motivating to get people to pay. Otherwise, small claims court is not as intimidating as people may think, and it's very effective in getting people to pay. So don't give up. That's what I'll say. And then find a lawyer who's willing to help you relatively inexpensively to write a demand letter and help you pursue a claim if you have to. There are big industries around collections. It's not the end of the world if somebody doesn't pay. If they have the means to, you can find a way to get paid.
So talking about getting something in writing, obviously a contract is the ideal form, but say you have an email, is that strong enough?
Oh, that's tough. Enforcing terms in an email, yes, an email is a little bit better than a handshake, but because it's evidence to support your claim. But again, without giving you legal advice and explaining the details of what that is, I would say if they're willing to put it in an email, they're probably willing to sign an agreement too. And a lot of the times I've heard people don't want to hire lawyers because they're afraid to get like a 30-page contract. Something is better than nothing, but if you can get an agreement where they're saying, I agree to pay you, $5,000 to build a website, that's a lot better than like, hey, Joe, like it's going to be $5,000. Is that cool? And then they respond and they don't really say yes, but they're like, let's move forward. I would say just get a contract.
So that brings me to my next topic, which is influencers and brands.
Okay.
So I know a lot of people just get excited when a brand reaches out to them, but are there any terms that should definitely be put in for an influencer and a brand? Obviously you work with influencers at different levels. So a starting out influencer versus more of a higher level influencer, is there anything people should make sure to definitely protect themselves?
Yeah. First of all, depending on the level that you're at, if you're just getting somebody to reach out to you on Instagram and they're like, hey, like you have a decent following, I'm starting a new company, I'm making candles or I'm making, some product. and they're like, I'm willing to pay you, $500 to feature my candle. At that level, I would get the money up front and then do whatever you guys agree to and make sure that the terms are very clear. Is it worth hiring a lawyer? I don't know, case by case, like I said. If you're at a higher level, more likely than not, either your manager, your agent, or the brand themselves are going to provide an agreement. In those cases, and we're talking probably more money in this case, get a lawyer that's going to represent you. I'm not saying that the manager or the agent or the brand aren't going to protect you in some way, but you always want someone in your corner fighting for you. And so if you're at that level and there isn't a contract, and we're talking about, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, up to whatever price these companies are willing to pay, it wouldn't make sense to do it without a lawyer in your corner. If your agent or your manager or the brand's like, no, we've got lawyers, they're looking over it. Lawyers have obligations to parties. If it's not your lawyer, their obligation is not to you. So if you're at that level, you shouldn't be doing anything without your own lawyer, at least giving you insider advice or helping you create a contract that you'll feel comfortable with. There are so many things, especially in the influencer space and in any business really, that you need to protect, like your brand, your name and likeness, your trademarks, anything that you don't want to kind of hand over the keys to the shop to somebody. You want to make sure that you're protected. And again, I'm not saying in any way that companies aren't, they're out there trying to take advantage of you. It's definitely not that way. There are a lot of protections built in for influencers, but again, I can't sit here and tell you to trust somebody else's lawyer. You should get your own.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people get excited when an influencer agency wants to represent them. And then, they rely on this agency to provide the legal contract and to advise them. But at the end of the day, and this isn't knocking agencies at all, I used to work at a talent agency. The agency is looking out for the agency. They are looking out for the client, but in terms of their legal duty is to the company as a whole, the agency as a whole. It is not to the client.
Yeah, I mean, the agency is regulated itself by whether it be the, Agency Act here in California or whatever state they're in, New York, what have you. So the agency has its own issues that it needs to cover and protect. And the agency also owes you certain duties and owes you certain obligations. But from a legal standpoint, if you don't have somebody on your team whose only interest is protecting you, then you're leaving yourself exposed. And if at the very least, you're not even paying attention to some risks that are there for you, because there's little things in contracts, and it's going back to the whole, doctor analogy. You're not going to want to get your legal advice from WebMD. So if you're just Googling terms in a contract that you have and hoping that someone online is giving you the information, the slightest change in one word can change the entire meaning of the contract. And I read contracts all day, and that's why I get paid to do what I do, because they're not fun. But if I know that I am trying, again, going back to what I said, I have a relationship with the client. I know their brand. I know their goals. I can make an opportunity with the brand go from the best thing that ever happened to them and elevates their brand to seeing it become the worst thing that ever happened. Maybe they can't collect, like we just talked about, or the brand now gets to manipulate the photos or the content, and they're unhappy that their blog was changed or their pictures, don't meet their aesthetics or their brand and their image. So, I mean, all that stuff matters. And then there's obviously all the boring contract stuff that is still very important. But at the same time, it should be your lawyer, not somebody else's looking at it.
So when do you need a trademark?
That's a great question. I started a business a long time ago, and I got a trademark, and now I have a worthless trademark. Was it a waste of money? No, because I was starting a company and the brand I thought was catchy and I wanted to protect it. So I spent the money. So really, if you can afford to get a trademark and you have a brand and it's trademarkable, whether it's the logo or the brand name or whatever it is, then do it. But at the same time, it's not that expensive to get a trademark. I went to my dad's lawyer, great lawyers, but I paid a lot of money for a trademark that, like I said, is now worth nothing. So find a lawyer that, like I said, is reasonably priced, understands what you're trying to do, and they should be able to advise you specifically. I mean, I'd be happy to offer that advice, whether you should get it trademarked or not, and whether it is even trademarkable. But I would say that, especially in the influencer space, your brand is your business. So trademarks are very important. because you could build a blog or a brand for 5 years, get a bunch of popularity and notoriety. Somebody starts another company with the name that you used, gets a trademark, they can shut you down. They can shut you down immediately. They can make you rebrand, change everything. I mean, it can be a nightmare of a situation and very expensive to deal with. So I would definitely prioritize trademarks if you're building a brand.
So as far as other forms go, your specialty might not be tax, but just in general, I think that's something that people probably should consider, but people don't know anything about. When you do a deal, is it over a certain amount of money made that you need to declare, or you need to ask for certain forms?
So this is where, I'm going to just basically disclaim immediately that I'm not a tax lawyer and I don't know anything about tax law that I would be willing to put my name to. This goes into the conversation of the team that you're building. Very successful entrepreneurs have a team that is built of people that are experts in their respective areas. So like for me, for example, I have a tax person, I have my own lawyer, I have marketing people, I have basically the things that I'm not good at, I have somebody to support me with. So when it comes to tax issues, absolutely. There are tax related issues associated with different things. I mean, everything from, if you're using people out of the country to help you with programming or with, image creation or whatever you're doing. I mean, if you're using freelancers that are, in the Philippines or India or things like that, there are certain forms that you have to file for the amount of money that you send out of the country. And there are forms that you have to file for payments that are made to you, whether they're made to you or made to your corporation. Taxes are not something you want to mess with. The IRS is not somebody you want on the other side in an adversarial situation. So without answering specifically like anything related to the tax requirements, just know there are a lot of them and you want somebody who knows what they're doing looking into it so you don't create problems.
So I've seen a lot of hashtag ads, hashtag sponsors happening now in Instagram posts and just on the net in general. What are the penalties for not disclosing? And have you noticed people having to add these to their posts actually affecting business?
So the rules on like native advertising versus sponsored posts versus just original content, product features, things like that. There's absolutely a duty of whether it be the publisher or the person to disclose whether or not they're being paid to push that content. In terms of the penalties, it really depends. It's hard to answer that in a blanket way. Usually there's regulations on both sides. So brands should be telling you their disclosure requirements of whatever they want in there. You should be informing your followers, your readers, your subscribers, whether it's a video or whatnot, that it's paid for content. The specific disclosures, because I'm not doing this in writing, I don't want to say what they should be, but there are specific disclosures that are required. Happy to talk to somebody about that if they need to know what they are. As far as the enforcement, that's the weird question. There's a lot of stuff out there that's paid for that nobody knows is paid for. Most of the time you can kind of tell. So as far as like the way it affects the influencer or the brand's ability to push content and having to put like sponsored post, ad, things like that, I think that us as consumers and followers, we get it. Like influencers are getting paid to push content. I don't think it's hurting them that much. But there is something very important about that and not putting it. If you are leading with the mindset of by putting ad, I'm hurting the chances of selling something, you're almost intentionally not disclosing, which is worse and bad. Because if you mistakenly don't put that it's an ad, you have, the what I like to call the dummy defense. Like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. But if you're going, I know I should be putting this and I'm not doing it because it hurts the content, you're almost intentionally doing something there. So be careful about that. But complying with those disclosures and complying with that is a big part of this industry that is starting to get more regulated. I know the FTC is really looking into this because of the power that influencers have in their influence. So if you don't even think about that stuff and you're an influencer and you have a substantial following, somebody may already be looking into you. So make sure you're doing it right. And the penalties can be very expensive and the legal fees to defend them can also be very expensive. So yeah, don't do it without knowing, that's for sure.
Do you usually advise for or against or neutral, depending on the client, for exclusivity deals with a brand?
That's that now we're kind of dipping into like the business strategy and less legal, which is kind of good because I can be a little more honest with my opinion. That has to be very much a business decision. I think that brands are wanting exclusivity because it kind of looks like if you're an influencer and you're like, these bathing suits and these, candles and these, this, and then you start doing another bathing suit brand or another candle brand. It's kind of like, okay, are you a billboard or are you actually, especially for content creators, their sharing and their influence is based on people like what they like because of the personality or because of their honesty in their reviews. And so I think brands that are looking for influencers want exclusivity because hopefully the influencer is going, I only push content or push products that I actually value. And they're not just a billboard for hire. So exclusive deals can be really valuable for both the brand and the influencer. And if you're getting an exclusive deal or you're giving an exclusive deal, you're probably going to get more money for it. At least you should, because you're essentially saying, I'm not going to promote any other brand that is in this industry for a certain period of time. And that all goes back to the contract side of it. So kind of dipping back into the legal side, make sure that your exclusivity, you understand the territory of the exclusivity and then the length of the exclusivity. And make sure that if you're going to sign yourself up for exclusivity, that you actually value that relationship because you're now tying yourself to one brand or one thing for a long time.
So going back to contract terms, have you ever seen some really ridiculous conversion guarantees or anything that would be just kind of a crazy thing that a brand is asking for?
Yes. I have seen specifically in terms of conversion guarantees, I would say that a lot of the times, funny enough, there's less interest in the metrics, which is weird. I don't see a lot of, we'll only pay you if you get X. Those deals that I've seen are typically sales related. So it's kind of like a commission as opposed to just a flat fee payment for content. But what I'll say is that some of the things that I've seen are so ridiculous, and also the contracts that I've seen, smaller brands or newer brands that haven't been in the space very long propose contracts. And this is usually unrepresented influencers that I've seen it with. And the contracts you're just like, what is this? It's like a 1-page, like, we can promote your content. We can create content with your brand. Things that you're like, yeah, no way. Like if you don't know what you're signing, you're basically saying they're allowed to create Instagram photos or blog posts with pretending to be you with your brand. And so, yeah, this is why lawyers are so important, but there are a lot of things that are being asked that are crazy, and just know the deal that you're getting into before you do it. Because I don't know, maybe some influencers don't even look at their own metrics and the analytics. This is what my fiance Jordan really helps with. If you don't know your conversion rates, if you don't know the analytics behind your site or behind your content, if you sign a deal that is kind of contingent on that, you may think it's a great deal, but it could actually be terrible. So yeah, it's out there. Just know what you're signing.
So you mentioned brand side contracts. If you're a brand or small business and you've never hired an influencer before, but you want to get in on either larger influencers or micro influencers, are there any contract terms or tips that you would suggest that they definitely put in or avoid putting in?
If you're a brand and you want to work with an influencer, my honest advice, because I've seen it, and this is to benefit both sides. Let the influencer make the content that they want to make. That would be a term that I would recommend for a brand, especially if you're a new brand and you're trying to get influencers to support what you're doing and you want to pay for something. I see brands that dictate every little thing, like the colors, the locations, the setting, the face. Meaning the facial expression. I want a half smile. I want a full smile. If you're a newer brand, I would say that what you should do is try to cater to the influencer. Let them create original content, meaning that they create it. They know what they want. They know what that's going to translate best to their following or their subscribers, and let them enjoy your product. And also make sure they like it. If they don't like your product, you probably shouldn't work with them. But I think that if you can get organic support, not paid for support from influencers by sending them examples or samples or whatever of what you do, that's kind of a great way to get into that area, because especially content creators, they need content. So, I know a lot of people that talk about like, well, if I just send them a bunch of free stuff, then I'm never going to really get, that ability to control the message. And in a way, it's almost like, yeah, once you're big enough and you want to control the message and you want to pay the prices you have to pay because it's expensive, great. But if you're new and you're starting out and you want to work with influencers, try to earn the influencer's trust, get them to love your brand. And most of the time, if they love your brand, like I said, they need content. They might support you without you having to pay for it. And then when you're big enough, you can pay to get their support and kind of dictate the message a little bit more.
That's awesome advice. Okay, so I have a question based on work that I do. I'm coming from a world where people are starting to vlog a lot. Camera following you around every day. If you've seen Daily V that Gary Vaynerchuk does, he has, somebody following him around with camera all the time. My question is from a legal perspective. I've thought about this a lot and I try to not think about it because the lawyer in me is like, I know that there's probably some issue here, but I want to make good content. Is there anything to be sensitive about when somebody is, let's say you're the client or you're a content creator and you're vlogging all the time, in terms of filming people who, are just either on the street, or filming people that you're having meetings with and maybe they don't fully know if they're being filmed or if you're mic'd, or kind of disclosures that need to be made? Because it seems like if you have a real production, you really need to get all the forms done. But if you're a vlogger, it's a little squishy.
So it's a great question. And of course, giving my legal disclaimer, these rules specifically are state specific, right? So in California, we have a requirement that everybody that's being recorded has to consent to the recording, right? So if I, for example, and this is maybe not the best example, but we're recording this current conversation. If somehow, you had made the call and we were chatting and I didn't know that it was being recording, and there's obviously a recording, it's obvious that it's being recorded. But if it wasn't obvious and you were recording me and you didn't tell me, then you would potentially and actually be violating a California, the penal code. So it's actually a crime. And if you're in a room and you're vlogging and you're in a place that, and again, I want to again say that it really depends on the situation. But if you walk into a room and you intentionally record somebody without letting them know, you could be violating a crime and definitely could be violating civil, laws. And if you're at a restaurant and you're recording, it's a public space. So what is the level of privacy for that space? If you walked into my office, I'm your attorney, and you're recording it, and I tell you something that's confidential and you post it on your blog later, that is not confidential information anymore. You've just made it public. It's not protected. So you should absolutely be careful with who you're recording, how you're recording, where you're recording, and what you're recording, and then also where you're posting those recordings. Because if I give legal advice in a closed setting and there was a recording and someone posts it, like I said, it's not confidential anymore. You've waived the attorney-client privilege. If you're walking into a room and secretly recording somebody, they could sue you. You could get charged criminally, in California at least. So it is something to pay attention to. But like I said, if you walked into my office and you had a camera crew with you and you're recording me, I'm not going to turn around and be like, I didn't know she was recording me. I'm not going to win that. But if you're like wearing like a Bluetooth mic or you're like have your phone in your pocket and you're recording me and you don't tell me, you could be breaking the law. So it's definitely important to pay attention to that. And when you're recording, making sure that people you are recording are okay with you recording them.
Yeah, I think there's times where it's obvious that it's recording, and then there's times where it's not as obvious because maybe the camera person steps away, but that audio is still recording.
If you came into my office and you were like, hey, we're going to record this entire conversation. This is my camera crew. We're all mic'd up. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. And you walk out of the room, or I'm sorry, the camera guy walks out of the room and we're talking. Mm-hmm. Again, depending on the specific situation, but in that circumstance, arguably, I knew it was being recorded. I knew I was mic'd up. I had the mic on me, or it was on you still. There would be hard. It would be hard for me to argue that I didn't know that it was being recorded. And so if we had a conversation and you were like, so tell me about X, and I say it, then, there's really no issue there because I knew I was being recorded. I had a mic on me or you had one on you. I should have known. But again, it's more if you're concealing it and you're not telling me and then you record me without me giving you my permission, that's where you're really getting an issue. And if you're like walking in the street, a lot of times you'll see this, like they blur certain people's faces, and people don't like to be recorded. And in the United States is very big on privacy. And so they don't want you to be subjected to an unwanted recording. And so if someone's like, don't record me, I don't want to be recorded, and you do it anyways, again, you're risking getting in trouble for it.
So since this podcast is about influence and you've worked with a lot of high level influencers, what do you think the secret to influence is based on who you've worked with and what you follow?
Oh man, I would say the most important thing with influencers is authenticity. It is really hard to fake a personality. It's really hard to fake, the brand that you're trying to put out. If you aren't being yourself, and I know, Gary Vee always says, document, don't create content, just document. It's hard to be fake all the time, and influencers are always on. So be yourself. And people, you mentioned this on one of your podcasts, you might not get 1 million followers or 20 million followers, but people who really value you authentically are going to be those diehard soldiers that are fighting for you. And so I think the secret sauce to gaining influence is being authentic, so that the influence you have is authentic, because people like people they can trust. And if you're putting out authenticity in your brand or in your content, you'll build trust. And I think that's extremely important. I mean, it's the same thing as a lawyer. I, as a lawyer, am an influencer. I am influencing business owners every day on what to do with their businesses to protect their businesses. As a business consultant or coach, I'm doing the same thing. If I'm not authentic, if I'm not being true to myself and true to what I believe in, they're going to see right through that. And they're going to be like, well, Nico was acting a little shady today. I don't really know if I'm going to take his advice. If they see a different side of me because I'm not being authentic, they're going to see right through me, and all of my credibility goes out the window. I think it's the same exact thing for public influencers.
Yeah, influence carries across all industries, which is definitely why I wanted to talk to you and why I'd like to talk to people who are outside of the social space, because your word matters and people rely on you for huge decisions that have huge financial implications. Absolutely.
And I have obligations to my clients and to the general public, as I've continued to disclaim things here on this conversation, that I'm regulated by the California State Bar. I'm regulated by the rules of professional responsibility. The civil laws are protecting me in terms of a malpractice standpoint. I'm legally regulated. So I have an obligation to make sure that what I'm doing is right, and that I'm not giving out bad information, and that I'm being authentic, and that I'm listening to you, and that I'm developing relationships and giving sound advice. Influencers in the beginning maybe weren't as regulated, and they're starting to get more and more regulated, like we talked about earlier with disclosures. You're going to get regulated on what you're saying to people. And so as long as you know what you're saying and you know what you're doing and you're protecting yourself, then you don't have anything to worry about. But if you're going out there and you're selling lies, or you're telling people to do something that you don't really believe in, you're going to get caught. You might not lose your license like I would, but you could lose your entire following and your business and a lot of money.
Are there particular people that you follow online or that you think are particularly influential, whether online or offline?
Yeah, I am a big fan I'm a big reader. I read like 3 or 4 books a week. So my influence a lot comes from authors and thought leaders, Simon Sinek, Gary Vee, Tony Robbins. Those are people that I really value their opinions. Like I said, I like to read. I get more out of a book than I get out of an Instagram post. So I would say that I'm not a huge Instagram influencer follower, aside from my amazing clients that are doing amazing things. But at the same time, I love the deep side of the conversations. And so I'm more into blogs. I'm more into, podcasts and videos. I feel that, Instagram is great to get kind of a little taste. But I would say my biggest followings are more on the blog side, the video side, like Gary Vee, and then also podcasts and books. Those are really my passion for influence.
Do you mind talking a little bit about your online brand? We talked about this beforehand.
Yeah.
I was a lawyer before all of this stuff. And the people that I know who are lawyers, for the most part, do not do anything involving personal branding. And I'm always encouraging them to, they don't even want to touch social. And I mean, there's tons of reasons for this. And you can kind of go into what you know about the industry and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So when I got introduced to the influencer world, it was through Jordan's brother and sister-in-law. They're big influencers, and they actually were on Gary Vee's podcast and video blog, I guess. And when they went out there, I kind of was introduced to Gary Vee, and I read his book, Crush It. And after reading that, being in the legal industry and having always kind of felt that I couldn't put myself out there because of the risk that people would be like, oh, he's a lawyer and he has tattoos and long hair. Like, what a weirdo. I'm not hiring him. It was kind of like the feeling that I got. And then after reading his book, it was like the value in establishing, building, and developing a personal brand. It's paramount to building a business, especially as a lawyer. So I kind of went out on a limb and started to build a personal brand that exposed a little bit of who I am as opposed to what I am. And has proven results. I mean, I think that I probably don't get a lot of clients from personal branding because older generations maybe don't like lawyers with long hair and tattoos. But at the same time, I get to work with people like me who I resonate with, I connect with, I understand the industries that they're in. And I also don't feel like, going back to that authenticity thing, by putting out a personal brand, by being myself online and not just posting pictures of me in a suit at the courthouse, like, look at me, I'm a lawyer, and actually sharing who I am as a person has allowed me to build more meaningful relationships with clients and attract clients who are interested in relationships, as opposed to the client that's just like, oh, I just got sued, save me, or I need an LLC, form it for me really quickly. It's like, hey, you seem like a cool person. I want to work with you, and you seem to have a lot of business experience and legal experience that can help me build my business. Let's be professional friends. But I mean, I'm friends with a lot of my clients anyways, but it allows me to kind of break that barrier of, I'm not just your lawyer. I'm somebody who actually supports you, cares about you, and wants to help you grow.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people find you?
People can find me, like I said, if you want to see my terrible social media presence, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Nico Becerra, ESQ, and it's Becerra is Becerra. And you can find me on my website at nbecerra.com. Again, that's my first initial N and then my last name.com. Or you can email me. My email is Nico, N-I-C-O, at Becerraco, Becerraco.com. I love talking to people who are entrepreneurs. It's my passion. So even if you're looking to just talk to me about something, please reach out to me. I love these conversations. I thank you for letting me be on this. I've loved this. This is what I love to do. It's my passion. So please reach out to me if you want to. If you follow me on Instagram, you're just going to see pictures of my beautiful fiance and our dog, and maybe occasionally some advice. But I love talking to business owners and networking and meeting people. So feel free to reach out to me if you're interested.
Well, thank you so much. And I don't even think people realize how valuable this is. I'm really excited about this episode because this is exactly the type of thing that people don't think about and they need to be thinking about.
Well, I am very happy to be able to provide the value, and I'm always looking to provide value if I can. And I will end it with, nothing was legal advice. And if you need legal advice, now you know where to reach me and I'll help you.
I hope this inspired people to seek out legal advice, not because they need it now, but hopefully they won't need it in the future. Or maybe they do need it now. Thank you for listening to Beyond Influential. If you found value in this week's episode, please rate and subscribe on iTunes. I'd love to know who you find influential. You can let me know on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Brittany Crystal, Krystle, or visit my website, brittanycrystal.com.
Beyond